All right, it's Wednesday night here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair Show. So we get all our papers in order and get everything ready to go. People start filing in. First Panther-Lair Show, first live Panther-Lair Show of 2023. Of course, we had a live stream last Friday night. That was fun. Finished off the whiskey in that one, which it timed up right to finish the Clayton James right at the end of the final football game of the season. I guess we're going to start doing live post-game shows for basketball, at least select basketball games, and we probably need to get a new bottle of whiskey. Although the way they're playing, I mean, the good thing about the whiskey was that it could be celebratory or sort of despondent. You know what I mean? You could either lift your spirits or further lift your spirits, I guess would be the two options there. And I think we certainly used it in both ways during the football season. And with the way the basketball team's going, maybe it'll be, rather than treating the bummer of losing a game, it'll be celebrating another victory, or maybe it'll just be something fun to do because we're going to sit down and talk for an hour live about Pitt sports. It's more fun to do it after taking a shot than it is. It's better to have a shot than to not have a shot. I don't know how some of these guys do 4 hours of radio without any hard liquor, but I guess that's why they're the professionals, and we're sitting here on a Wednesday night doing a YouTube live stream, right? Anyway, the site here, the YouTube channel, it's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. There's a blue rectangle right down there. If you see it, it's in if you're looking at the Panther-Lair.com logo, it's down in that right hand corner. There's like a yellow bubble around the .com. Right over that is a blue rectangle. It says subscribe. If you hover over it, you're going to get an option to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And once you do that, you can turn on your notifications. So you get an alert sent to your phone anytime we publish new content, anytime we go live. So when we go live for this show tonight, if you forgot about it, you had a busy Wednesday, you had something else going on, you get a little notification. Oh, that's right. Live Panther-Lair Show tonight. I don't want to miss that. Or if we start going live after basketball games, you get a little notification. Oh, that's right. Panther-Lair post game after a hoops game. I don't want to miss that. And so you won't miss it because you'll get the notification. You'll get the alert sent to you. Or when we post a new video. And I'll take this moment right here to say you're going to want that notification for tomorrow's morning pit, for the Thursday morning pit. Now, if you're watching this live stream as a non-live stream, or listening to it as a podcast later in the week, you'll need to go back and find it. But if you're watching this live right now, I'm telling you that you are going to want to check out the Thursday edition of the Morning Pit. It's pretty good. We got something pretty good planned for you. It's a longer episode, and I think you're going to really like what we have. I know I enjoyed putting it together, being a part of it, and the content that came out of it was really good. I think it's going to be something people are going to be interested to hear, and certainly interested to talk about throughout the day. So you want to make sure you don't miss that, right? Well, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Turn on the notifications. You'll get an alert sent to your phone, and you'll know when that thing goes live. 7 a.m. is the target time. I might click it earlier than that. Either way, you're going to want to know when we publish it because you're going to want to check it out. Of course, that'll be on the podcast options as well. I think we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Not sure if we're on anything else, but I think we're on those. You can also just watch the video. So youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like and subscribe right now. And then, of course, check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. The most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends. You're a Pitt fan. You like to talk to other Pitt fans. You like to talk about Pitt sports. And there's no better place to do it than the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. I think it's the best online community of Pitt fans that you're going to find. And it's right there. And message boards get a bad rap, but the reality is people like to talk about sports. Sports fans like to talk about their favorite teams. And that's the place to do it. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. We'll get into some of the topics that are obviously dominating the message boards today in the wake of last night's win over Virginia. The Pitt basketball team, so we got Nike Sabandi on the screen right there as we segue into that conversation. But we do have to start off. I haven't really talked about it on the Morning Pit today or yesterday, but we talked about it on Monday Or no, we talked about it yesterday, actually. But we do have to, continue to show our support for Damar Hamlin. Longtime friend of Panther-Lair.com. I mean, I don't know if he consider himself a friend of Panther-Lair.com, but certainly someone we've known for a long time. I think I first talked to Damar Hamlin when he was like a sophomore in high school. So, talking about 8 years of knowing the guy at least professionally, and always found him to be gracious, humble, a mature young man who I think grew in that maturity over the course of his career at Pitt. He always believed he was an NFL prospect. He truly developed himself into an NFL prospect, both in his actions and performance on the field and off the field. I always felt like Damar Hamlin grew up heading into his senior year, that extra year that he got at Pitt when he came back for an extra season in 2020. I always thought that his approach to the offseason process, the pre-combine, pre-pro day, pre-draft process, I always thought that was a model for what younger players should follow, because he entered the offseason and he worked really, really hard and became a 6th-round pick and ran a 40 that was, I forget what it was, but I remember thinking, boy, that's a lot faster than I thought Damar was. Jason Pinnock followed that model as well, just went into the offseason and worked really, really hard. And we've seen other guys who maybe didn't follow that model not end up in the position that Damar Hamlin is in, being a starting safety in his second year in the NFL after being a 6th-round draft pick. In a lot of ways, Damar Hamlin's path is what a lot of young football players, a lot of aspiring college student athletes should try to follow. And I talked about this on the Morning Pit yesterday. In the wake of Damar's, can't even call it an injury, his condition, the incident, the cardiac arrest during the Monday Night Football game. In the wake of that, I talked about it on the Morning Pit yesterday that he always embraced that role of being a role model, of being someone for the younger, I shouldn't even say younger players, but just for the youth in the city of Pittsburgh to look up to. And he understood that and he embraced it. And it was what he wanted to be. And he wanted the responsibility that comes with it. And I always admired that about Damar. And so we continue to send our best to Damar, to his family. I don't typically go over the whole thoughts and prayers thing. It's just, our support is there like everyone. We want him to get better. Like everyone else, we want him to get better. And there's nothing I can do sitting here on my YouTube channel doing a live stream on a Wednesday night other than to say, I hope Damar gets better. I hope he gets better as soon as he can. I hope he gets as healthy as he possibly can. I want to see him walk out of that hospital. That's what it ultimately comes down to. And so, from all of us here to Damar, I think anybody watching this podcast or following along with this live stream or whatever would say the same thing. We're all wishing for the best and hoping for the best and look forward to every update that comes. Moving on then from the unfortunate events on Monday night to what we saw at the Peterson Event Center last night. Pitt basketball team knocks off Virginia, ranked number 11 in the AP poll, probably overrated, I would say, and not just because they lost to Pitt. A brief aside, and the Pitt fans didn't do this. Much credit to the Zoo. They did not do this. But I always crack up when fans will do the overrated chant, because their team is beating the team that was ranked higher. The overrated. And I never got that, because sort of what you're saying is, you're chanting overrated to say that the other team is not as good as people think they are. And the most immediate and pressing evidence of the fact that that team is not as good as people think they are is the fact that they're losing to your team. You're kind of like saying, like, man, if you guys lost to us, there's no way you should be ranked as high as you were. It's kind of a self-own. And I don't think, and I've thought this for the past 15 years. I just don't understand the overrated chant. Like, well, how could you really be that good if you lost to us? And it's like, well, I don't think you're making the point that you mean to make in that case. As a matter of fact, you should go the other way. And when your team beats a highly ranked team, a team ranked in the top 10 or top 5 or whatever it is, you should be chanting like properly rated or underrated. Like, that team is ranked 5. They should be ranked number 1. And that's how good our team's accomplishment was. nevertheless, I don't think Virginia is the number 11 team in college basketball. I don't know who is. I don't know where I would put them. I think they're a very good team. I think they play their way very well. Even going into the game last night, I don't know if I thought Virginia was the number 11 team in college basketball. But they are a good team, and they're coached by a very good coach, and they have very good players who are able to do the things that that very good coach wants them to do. And they're going to be a challenge for anybody they face in the ACC the rest of the way, and they'll be a challenge for teams in the NCAA. And they've got their own shortcomings. They've got things they certainly have to work on over their next 16, 18 games, however many they have left to play. But I think they're still a good team. And I think Pitt's win last night was a good win. Panthers win 68-65. Really, it should have been 68-62. And my call of a 6-point Pitt win should have been right on. I called it 70-64. It was a 68-62 game. Virginia made a 3 at the end. It cut the lead to 3 points. It made it a 3-point win as opposed to a 6-point win. But the story of this game was how Pitt fell behind. They trailed by 13 in the first half. They trailed by 10 at halftime. They trailed by 12 as late as, the 16-minute mark of the second half. And they came back. They didn't wilt. They didn't go away. They didn't sort of collapse and let the game get completely out of hand, which kind of was the case against, West Virginia for one earlier this season, and certainly games that we saw in previous years. But they battled back. And they kept fighting, and they relied on their senior leaders to make the plays. And Nelly Cummings made plays. He had 6 assists. Over the final 16 minutes of the game, when Pitt overcame a 12-point deficit to ultimately win by 3, during that stretch, Nelly Cummings had 6 assists and made a couple baskets and a couple free throws. Federico was huge during that stretch. He had 5 rebounds and shot 4 of 5 from the floor and had a steal. Pitt had 13 rebounds total during that stretch. I mean, it was Jamarius Burton was making plays. Nike Sabandi made plays. Blake Hinson made plays. He drew 3 fouls during those final 16 minutes. Blake Hinson did. They relied on their senior leaders to make the plays and lead them back. And those guys took over. And it's becoming a trend, not necessarily the trend of falling behind in games and having to stage comebacks, but the trend of those leaders really kind of not dragging the team to victory, but being the impetus for it. Nike Sabandi said last night after the game, he talked about how they the players all put batteries in each other's backs. And these themes of firing each other up, of being together, of believing in each other, of being a team, being a family, these things keep coming up. And they come up with a lot of teams. And a lot of times it sort of feels just like empty words. But more and more I'm starting to buy into it with this team, that this team has a certain chemistry that, for sure previous Pitt teams did not have. The previous 4 Jeff Capel teams did not have. I don't know if the Kevin Stallings teams had them or not. You would think if they had anything even resembling anything even slightly positive, they would have had better results than they ended up with. But it's been a while since we've seen a Pitt team have the kind of chemistry that this team seems to have, the kind of togetherness that this team seems to have. And I think some of that comes from having the veterans that they've got, the senior guards, the experienced players all over the court who are able to sort of set a tone in the locker room, where a guy like Nelly Cummings can come in, and even though he's only been at Pitt since the summer, can really go a long way in setting the tone in the locker room. Greg Elliott, I think the energy he brings sets a certain tone with this team. I think Blake Hinson, with the kind of energy he has, which I think is a different kind of energy from what Greg Elliott brings, I think he can set a tone. I think Jamarius Burton, who, sort of on the opposite end, is very reserved, almost stoic. The stoic Jamarius Burton, who's a hell of a playmaker, sets a certain tone for this team, and it filters down, and I trickles down, and I think the team picks up on it, and they feed into it, and they play into it. And it's led to an 11-4 record so far and a 4-0 start in the ACC. The first time since Pitt's first year in the ACC that they've opened a conference schedule 4-0. I mean, the last time Pitt had a 4-0 start in ACC play, one of their 4 wins was against Maryland. I mean, it's been that long. I had to look twice at the media guide when I was trying to look for that last 4-0 start. I looked back at the 2013-14 season. I said, I think it happened here, but I don't get it. What's it? Oh, wait, why does Maryland have a little asterisk next to it as if that was a conference game? Oh, yeah. Maryland was in the ACC at that point. That's how long it's been. Pitt has only beaten Virginia once as a member of the ACC, and that was in 2017. So, I mean, you're treading in unprecedented waters here with the success that Pitt has had, the success that they're having, winning back-to-back games against ranked opponents, fresh on the heels of a close win at the Dome. And you really look at these last 3 wins, and you say, okay, they went to Syracuse, played at the Dome, which is not an easy place to play, certainly has a reputation for a reason. They get a 20-point lead. They end up blowing it, but they hold on to eke out a win. They face Carolina, which, whatever you want to say about North Carolina this year, there's still a lot of talent. They're a very talented team. There's a reason they were ranked number 1 in the preseason. There's a reason that no matter what happens to them over the, from now through the end of February, they're going to make noise in the ACC tournament. They're going to make noise in the NCAA tournament because at that point, if you have the talented players, those guys can take over games. And North Carolina has those talented players, Love and Davis and Baycott. And so that's a good North Carolina team. It's a talented team. It's got high-end talent. And Pitt went toe-to-toe with them, blow for blow, and held on down the stretch. And then they have this game against Virginia where they fall behind. And really throughout the first half, they weren't able to do what they wanted to do. In the first 4 minutes or so of the second half, they weren't able to do what they wanted to do. Virginia's vaunted defense, for all that we talk about it, was sort of well-tuned and well-oiled to stop Pitt from doing the things that had gotten them so much success. I mean, you look at Jamarius Burton going off against Carolina. He didn't go off against Virginia. He still scored 15 points, but he was 5 of 14 from the floor. It's a far cry from his 31 points the other day against North Carolina because because Virginia's defense is far more challenging for a player with the style of Jamarius Burton. But they didn't lose hope. They didn't lose their resolve. They kept battling and they fought through it, and they eventually started cracking that defense. And I think they cracked it to such a degree that even Tony Bennett after the game was surprised. He didn't really understand how it happened. He said he was like they were getting to the paint way more than we're ever really comfortable letting anyone get to the paint. And I'm sure he has some theories about what happened. He had some ideas about why Pitt was able to have that success. And there are certainly things for the Pitt coaching staff to take from that success and learn from. But when it comes down to it, it's really just about players making plays. And Cummings, Burton, Sabandi, Hinson found ways to make plays and ultimately win the game. You come back from it's very difficult to come back from a 12-point second half deficit against Virginia. They're too efficient on offense, and more importantly, they're just too good on defense. It's really hard to score in consecutive possessions against Virginia. It's hard to crack that defense on consecutive possessions and do it enough times to overcome, when you're down a dozen points. But Pitt was able to do it. And now, I put out something like this on Twitter earlier today that, I know there's, Pitt fans are always going to wait for that other shoe to drop. I mean, they could have, they could be playing they could have played in the ACC championship game this year and had a 45-0 lead on Clemson at halftime, and Pitt fans would say, I don't know, not sure if they're going to hold on for this. There's always a feeling of waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I understand that. But as this team continues to win, and as they continue to play well, and as they continue to show sort of the foundation that they've built with this year's roster, and how it works together, and how they're succeeding together, and how they're feeding off each other, and how they're playing together, and blending, and believing in each other, as those sort of guts of the operation continue to show themselves to be not just a fluke, but maybe what they're really made of, the likelihood of this team being for real increases. And we're going to keep playing this game, I think. I think those of us who watch the team, whether it's media or fans, who knows, maybe even Jeff Capel and some of his guys, we're going to keep playing this game where we keep watching this team and wondering, are they really for real? 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 And we're going to keep asking and asking and asking because it was tough after North Florida and, Sacred Heart. It was tough to say, are they for real? I mean, they're doing a great job coming back when they're down at halftime against William and Mary or whoever it is. But they go to Syracuse and, okay, they blew a big lead, but they ended up holding on to win it. And then they beat Carolina at home. And you're like, okay. And then they beat Virginia at home. You're like, okay. And each game is going to continue providing another test to find out if this team is for real. Now, word of caution, something you probably all recognize, or at least you'll say you do, and we'll see how you react when it actually happens. They will lose another game. Probably a few. I mean, that's going to happen. It's just the inevitable nature. You play 30 games in a schedule, you're going to lose some games here and there. You know, you play 20 conference games, you're not going to get out of it undefeated. You're not going to go 20-0. There's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 losses. And some of those, they might look pretty bad. Might look like the wheels are coming off. Might look like all the things we've led ourselves to believe through the first 15 games are inaccurate. And that's inevitable. I'm reminded of something Jeff Capel said probably a couple weeks ago, maybe right after Christmas. Maybe it was last week. I don't know. The last 3 weeks have just blended together. But actually, basically since the beginning of December, it's all been one blur for me. But he said something a couple weeks ago where he said, you know, there are going to be overreactions. I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said there are going to be overreactions to anything the team does. If they win a few, it's all going to be really high. If they lose one or two, it's all going to be really low. But it's all going to be overreactions. And the key is to stay sort of steady. Now, I'm the first one to say that it doesn't mean two licks what fans do. Fans want to look ahead. You know, it always cracks me up in the message boards when people start talking about a couple games down the road and fans will say, "Oh, you can't look too far ahead. We don't want to get caught looking ahead." I mean, it doesn't matter if fans look ahead. You want to look ahead, look ahead. You know, you're not out there on the field or on the court. You know, the players and the coaches need to stay focused on the next week's opponent. But fans, you can look ahead. You can do whatever you want. You can overreact no matter what. Jeff Capel was talking about his guys need to make sure they don't overreact. That if they lose one or two, they don't get too low. And if they go out and win a few, they don't get too high. But here's the other part to that. Because there are overreactions. And there were overreactions when they lost to Vanderbilt. Certainly when they lost to West Virginia and Michigan and VCU. There were overreactions then, and the pendulum's swinging the other way right now. And this is not to say that Pitt has not been good. They have very much been good, and believe me, I'm going to come around to that point at the end of this here. But I think, you know, I see some of these takes about Pitt is back. Pitt is back. They're back, man. Pitt is back. Just relax, okay? Just relax. Pitt was back after they beat Duke a couple of years ago. Remember that? Pitt was back. Well, they didn't really stay back for very long, did they? Just relax, okay? It doesn't matter about Pitt is back or the program has arrived or they're back like they were in the early 2000s. Who they were in the early 2000s didn't happen in one game. It didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen in one season. You know, it was a slow, steady build over the course of multiple seasons of sustained success. Okay, what you have right now in this very moment, Wednesday, January 4th at 8:55 p.m. or 8:53 p.m., whatever time it is, Eastern time zone, what you have right now is a team that's playing really, really well, that's built in a very specific and intentional way, and it's executing that design almost to its fullest potential, with room to still grow on a variety of levels, personnel related. That's what you have right now. You have a team that has started 4-0 in the ACC. You have a team that, you know, given the look of the conference this season, could win a bunch of games in the league. You have a team that looks like it's built on you know, in terms of this season, built on its success is sustainable. Its success is built on something tangible. It's built on shooting. It's built on veteran leadership. It's built on playmaking guards. Like, those are things that you can count on right now with this team. And that's a pretty good place to be. We don't have to take that to the next step and say Pitt is back. Because all you're doing when you do that, when you say Pitt is back, you're just setting yourself up for a letdown when they inevitably do lose a game. All right? Remember what your goals have been with this team. Remember what has, you know, you've convinced yourself for a long time, what you've convinced yourself of, you know, counts as success. Getting close to 20 wins, winning more than you lose, a winning record in the ACC. being on the bubble, maybe making the NCAA tournament. This team right now looks like it's capable of doing all those things. And if they win 20 games, and if they win, overall, and if they win 14 or 15 games in the ACC, and if they make the NCAA tournament, I don't know if it means Pitt is back, or Pitt is returned, or Pitt is front, or Pitt is this, or Pitt is that. What it means is that they've got a very good team this season right now. And we'll worry about the overall state of the program at a later date. Because, just as a quick aside, a whole bunch of the guys that are bringing Pitt back right now aren't going to be back next year. And so if Pitt's really going to be back, it's going to take more than just having success this season. So set that aside and look at what they're doing right now. Because what you have, I don't know what the program is. I don't know where the program is. I don't know what the state of the program. I don't know if Pitt is back. What I do know is they're playing really good basketball right now. Really exciting basketball. It's fun basketball to watch. It's fun to watch these guys having fun. It's fun to watch the energy they play with. And it's fun to know, with a fair amount of confidence, that they're never really out of a game. Now, you say all this, and they could go to the Clemson game on Saturday and fall down by like 25 early in the second half and clearly be out of the game. But fresh off of, coming back from 12 down, with 16 minutes to play on last night, I'm pretty confident in saying that they're never totally out of a game, just because they can shoot themselves back into it. They can shoot themselves out of a game, but they can shoot themselves back into it. They're that good. They've got the trigger men who can do it. And Hinson and Elliott, Cummings and Burton, to a lesser extent, Sabandi as well. They've got the shooters, and they've got the veteran guards. And that's a pretty good thing to be built on. You start working John Hughley back into the mix. Who knows when he's going to be back? Maybe as soon as Saturday. I think Federico's earned the right to continue starting until Hughley's ready to take 25, 30 minutes. Or really, 20 or 25 minutes, I guess I should say. But bringing John Hughley off the bench is not the worst thing if he's ready to get in there and contribute. And if it takes a little while to ease him back in, that's fine. You would like to have, on one hand, you want John Hughley playing at his highest level. But you'd like to have a little bit more depth at the center position than you've got right now. Guillermo Diaz-Graham is not ready to play. He played 4 minutes last night. And I'm not sure that he was really ready for that level of minutes. Did he play 4? I said 4. I think that's what it ended up being. Guillermo played 5, actually. Jorge played 4. Jorge maybe is a little bit more ready. He's played more this season than Guillermo has. But you're going to need a reserve center. And, John Hughley, I think, could be good at that initially when he comes back. And if he returns to his level of play, that we've seen from him previously, maybe he gets back into the starting lineup and Federico is the reserve. Either way, you just need more depth at the center position. You probably like another guard/wing to step up. Probably Nate Santos would be the guy. He played about 2 minutes last night. You'd like to get a little bit more out of him, just with as many 3-guard lineups as they use. Having this rotation just with basically 4 guys, that's tough. That's tough to manage. I think last night they had, Hinson, Cummings, and Burton all played the full 20 in the second half. And, that's good. You want your horses on the court, but, I don't know if you're going to be able to do that night in, night out when you're playing every 3-4 days in the ACC. But overall, things are in pretty good shape with this Pitt basketball team right now. There's always things they can improve, always things they can get better at. But they're in pretty good shape right now. Let's check in here and see what's going on in the live stream with the comments and questions, what people have been talking about. That's great that Sabo, the first comment is Pitt basketball is back. Did you say that before I started saying about Pitt basketball maybe not being back or not getting caught up in talking about whether or not Pitt basketball is back? Jeff Capel said it himself. Said, don't overreact to the highs and the lows. Just, stay even and steady. And I think that's good advice for his team, but it's probably good advice for the fans too. It's been a while since you've been in a position where your team is really successful. And what you might have forgotten from like 2003, 2007, 2010, all those years, you might have forgotten that even when a team is like successful and winning 25 games, 24 games, something like that, 30 games, they still have losses. And those losses are going to come. If you spend all your time during the wins talking about how Pitt is back, then when they lose a game, you're going to collapse and think that Pitt is not back. they're a very good team right now. One that can compete in the ACC, win a bunch of games, and should be able to position itself for a postseason bid. But they have a long way to go between here and there. And we can talk about the state of the program after the season's over. All right, before we get into more comments and questions, I gotta mention our guy Chris Gates. You've heard about Chris. I've talked about Chris, I feel like all fall, through the fall and through the winter. ChrisGatesFitness.com. He sponsors the show tonight, and it's great to have Chris on board. He's an online fitness coach. And what he does is he works with people all over the world to create customized fitness and nutrition programs that work, and he supports his clients every step of the way. Plus, he's a huge Pitt fan, and he loves supporting the podcast, so we love him for that. And look, I'm going to jump right into it. Here's the most important thing you need to know right now. If you've been listening to me talk about Chris and what he does at ChrisGatesFitness.com, if you've been listening to me talk about this throughout the fall and the winter, I need to apply a little more urgency to it tonight, okay? Because Chris is opening, actually they are open right now, applications for Chris's one-on-one online fitness coaching program. It's open right now through January 8th. What day is the 8th? 4, 3, 2, 1, Sunday, okay? It's open through the 8th. And then after that, all right, he's not going to open the applications again until late spring, early summer. Chris tries to cap the number of people he's working with so he can really make sure everyone gets the attention and the support that they need. This is the whole point, all right, is, when you work with Chris at ChrisGatesFitness.com, he's developing something specifically for you. No one else is going to have the program that he develops for you. And he wants to make sure you're keeping to it, and he wants to give you as much support as he can, so he limits the number of clients he takes on at any given time. All right, that means there's a window when he opens up for the coaching applications, and he's only got a few spots left. He's already nearing that cap. So if you want to check out what Chris can do for you, how he can help you reach your goals, you need to do it now, because the coaching applications are going to close on January 8th. So if you're interested in setting a health or a fitness goal for the new year, and you want to make sure you're able to not only make progress, but sustain it, go to ChrisGatesFitness.com/coaching to learn more and apply. Chris Gates, CHRIS, Gates, GATES, fitness.com/coaching. And as always, you get 75% off your first month of coaching if you mention Panther-Lair when you apply. Big thanks to Chris for supporting the podcast. Big thanks to everybody who watches the podcast who has gone out and checked out what Chris has to offer and what he's doing for Pitt fans and anyone interested in getting getting more involved with their health, their fitness, their nutrition. All right, let's jump into comments and questions. We have a super chatter here. Bill Florian says, going over the football side, we haven't really talked. We haven't talked about football at all on this game or on this live show so far. But Bill says, you mentioned a few times this season about the offensive woes and that Pat Narduzzi had to figure out if it was Frank Cignetti or Keaton Slovis. Did the Sun Bowl answer that? That's a good question, Bill. That's a great question, because I did talk about that a lot. I talked a lot, particularly at midseason, about that question facing Narduzzi, that he would have to get to the end of the season and ask himself, was it Slovis or was it Cignetti? And the reality is it's probably a bit of both. But was there one party that was more to blame for the offensive performance, the quarterback or the coordinator? And I don't know what conclusion Pat Narduzzi reached out of that. He ultimately didn't have a decision to make because Keaton Slovis left and transferred. He's at BYU now. Did the Sun Bowl change my opinion or my thoughts on whether it was Cignetti or Slovis that was the bigger issue? Yes and no. Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a question to be asked about the quarterback that was chosen to start. I'm not 100% convinced that they made the wrong decision initially to go with Keaton Slovis. I think there were probably points this season when they could have made a change to see if Nick Patti would give them a spark. For as glowingly as Pat Narduzzi talked about Nick Patti over the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks heading up to the Sun Bowl, and certainly based on how Patty played in the Sun Bowl, the plays that he made at some key moments to help Pitt win that game, sure, I think absolutely you look at it and say, he couldn't have given you a spark against Georgia Tech or against Louisville. And really just those two games. You know what I mean? Those would be the two games that I would circle. It would say you didn't think that at some point, I mean, I guess if you're still thinking long-term on the season and you're thinking, all right, Kedon Slovis is the better quarterback, we need to stick with him and give him a chance to work through his problems. I mean, maybe that's the logic. That he ultimately has more upside, higher upside, that he gives you a better chance down the road over the final, over the second half of the season. So you got to stick with him in the Georgia Tech game. You got to stick with him at Louisville. And you have to give him a chance to try and work his way out of it, to throw his way out of it and get more comfortable in the offense. Maybe that was the reasoning. But it seems to me, you have to think big picture. You have to think long term, but you also have to win the damn game. And if you're sitting there in the Georgia Tech game or you're sitting there at Louisville and you're watching your offense just, drive after drive, just waste a really strong defensive performance, because Pitt's defense was really good in both of those games. Georgia Tech and Louisville. They weren't perfect. They gave up some plays, but it's college football. You're inevitably going to give up some yards and give up some points to the opponent. You need to be able to outscore, even a really good defensive performance might require you to score more than 20 points. That seems like, that should be the bare minimum expectation for a college offense, is to be able to get into the 20s, and Pitt struggled with that multiple times this season. And so to not give him a shot in those games, to not say, screw it. And it's not a matter of, sometimes fans will say this about like a freshman. Why not just put that freshman in there? You might as well just see what he can do. Maybe he surprises you. There's not as much of a surprise element with Nick Patty. I mean, his ups and his downs. His strengths and his weaknesses. And you knew them coming into this season. You knew what you were going to get if you put him in there against Georgia Tech or if you put him in there against Louisville. You probably had a pretty good idea of what he was going to be able to do. He was going to be able to move around a little bit. He was going to keep a play alive, and he could make a few throws. And so to not give him, that's the decision that I think ultimately gets called into question. If the Sun Bowl shines a light on any questionable decisions, it's probably that one. Not necessarily that they should have started Patty from the very beginning. Not necessarily that they should have benched Kedon Slovis after this game or that game. But to not try Patty when the season was ultimately slipping away. One of the worst, arguably the worst loss of the Narduzzi era in the Georgia Tech game. I've come around on that. I kept saying, after that game, no, come on. It's not worse than Western Michigan. Western Michigan was worse. No, I think Georgia Tech was worse. I think that was the worst loss of the Narduzzi era. And to be in the middle of that, to be sliding down that black hole that you saw coming, by halftime for sure, everyone saw that was a very real possibility that they could lose that game. And to not try Nick Patty, I think that's the decision that gets called into question. And the same thing with the Louisville game. No matter how much you want to rationalize those interceptions, and I rationalize them too. Well, he had this or that, or well, he did this or he did that. Okay. But your offense sucks. Your offense is not moving the ball. Your offense is not scoring points. So to not take a chance, to not try, with someone who is something of a known commodity. Again, you're not putting a guy out there who's never played before. This is a known commodity. And who knows? Maybe if Patty doesn't get hurt against Tennessee, maybe he wins that game, maybe he doesn't. But if he doesn't get hurt against Tennessee, he goes and starts the Western Michigan game, probably wins it like Nate Yarnell did, and maybe plays well enough to earn himself a spot, earn himself a shot against who they play, Rhode Island or somebody, their FCS game the next week. Maybe he plays well enough to earn himself another start, and maybe something changes there. There's an element of bad luck, but I think, if he was healthy by the Georgia Tech game, and maybe he wasn't, maybe he was still unavailable by the Georgia Tech game, because he wasn't available for Western Michigan. I feel like he wasn't available for Rhode Island, maybe he wasn't available for Georgia Tech. Maybe that's the answer to the question. But I think by the Louisville game he would have been able to play, and to not take a chance there. I think that's what the Sun Bowl. That's the biggest question the Sun Bowl raises to me, and that's the question that it leaves unanswered, is why Why didn't you at least try? You see the impact that he has. It's not pretty. It has a certain schoolyard feel to it, a playground feel to it when you watch Nick Patty play, but he got the job done. He got the job done. Let's see here. Matt P says, what a blessing in disguise if John Hughley is able to figure it out and even get back to 75-80% of what he was last year. You now have 2 ACC starter caliber centers with a complete team and guards. The Hughley thing is so interesting to me. I mean, first of all, nobody hesitated. Jeff Capel included, nobody hesitated to call John Hughley Pitt's best player entering the season. Everybody knew John Hughley was their best player. We did our staff picks before the season. Who's going to be the MVP? We all picked John Hughley. John Hughley was the man. And we knew that. And so, you start with that as the baseline. That if you can add the guy we've all agreed is your best player, even though right now if you took a poll, probably it wouldn't be the case. But if you can add a guy that most people agreed was your best player preseason back into the lineup that's been doing well and has you off to a 4-0 start in the ACC, that's a good thing. I think you start with that as a baseline. But there's also, something to be said for chemistry, something to be said for these guys having learned how to play together. And quite frankly, they've learned how to play with Federico, who plays a very different style than what John Hughley is. Now, I keep talking about the experience and the veteran guards. I'm sure Jamarius Burton and Nelly Cummings can learn how to play with John Hughley just like they learned how to play with Federico. And I think even if Hughley comes back and he's awesome, Federico has earned himself plenty of minutes. I would say the start for the next few games, he has earned himself the right to continue starting for the next couple of games. And, even if John Hughley eventually overtakes him and reclaims that starting center job, I mean, Federico has earned minutes on the court, minutes, 20 minutes a game. I think he's earned that. I mean, even a game like last night, you saw him just grow throughout the game. His first half, just threw my pen across the room for no reason. His first half, Federico had one field goal attempt, no baskets, and he had 6 rebounds. In the second half, he scored 8 points, all in the comeback stretch. He grabbed 5 rebounds, had a steal, all in that comeback stretch, where Pitt came back from 44-32 to ultimately winning the game 68-65. And you saw him, because it was the first half, and I turned to, who's sitting next to me? Zeiss. I turned to Paul Zeiss, and I said, man, 33 is not ready to play at this level. Because he looked like he wasn't. He didn't look like he could defend at this level. He didn't look like he could score at this level. I ate my words in the final 16 minutes because he was outstanding. He was really good. He finished plays at the basket. He probably should have had another field goal, but he scooped a ball off of Jamarius Burton, who had fallen down, and just as he was about to go up, he slipped and he fell down, and it ended up being a turnover. I think it went as a turnover for Federico. It might have been his only turnover of the game, actually. But I mean, he was outstanding, and like I say, you saw him get better throughout the game, and so I think you have to be mindful of chemistry. You have to be mindful of what's developed for this team and how they've come together. But you also want to get John Hughley back out there. I'm erring on the side of it being a good problem to have right now. I'm still not concerned. And I know I've said all season up until this point, I'm not concerned about John Hughley getting back on track. My concern level with John Hughley is low, and that continues to be the case. What I'm almost more concerned about is the impact his return has on his teammates, who have learned, again, they've learned how to play with a different style of center. And they've learned how to play with them being the focal points as opposed to Hughley being the focal point. But that said, it's very tantalizing to think of the John Hughley of last year playing with this group of shooters. And I mean, I think if Hughley plays like he did last year and they've got these guards and these shooters around him, most teams are going to have a really hard time with that because he's going to be tough to defend. And if they finally just collapse on him, there's open shooters outside who will take those shots all day long. which is how it was supposed to work. That's how this whole thing was built. That's how they put this team together. It was supposed to work that way. Let's see. Matt P says, I would still start Fetty and bring Hughley off the bench. I wouldn't want to fix what isn't broken in terms of flow of the offense. The ball in the offense should continue to flow through the guards. Will says, Fetty definitely earned the starting spot. Having a healthy Hughley off the bench would really help down the stretch. Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I think Jeff Capel is going to have to manage this situation. When John Hughley comes back, he's going to have to manage the situation, and make sure that you don't disrupt the good thing that you've built so far. And that's probably going to be Capel's biggest challenge. Scott Lynch is a super chatter. We appreciate that. He says, is the lack of depth going to catch up to us? Outside of Hughley, is there anyone else that might step up at this point? So I think in your ideal situation, I just wrote about something about this today on Panther-Lair.com. I think in your ideal situation, if you're Pitt right now, you could go 3 deep. 3 deep. You could go 8 deep. You've got, let's say you stick with Federico as a starter. So you're starting 5. You've got Nelly Cummings, Jamarius Burton, Greg Elliott, Blake Hinson, and Federico. And then coming off the bench, obviously you have Nike Sabandi as a spark. You need him. He's been playing great in that bench role, that 6th-man role. You like, Hughley as a reserve center. And ultimately, if he plays well and he becomes the starter, then you have Federico as a great reserve center. That's 7. And then I think you want another guard/wing. And I think that guy has to be Nate Santos. I think he's the guy who, if you're going to have an 8-man rotation with 8 guys playing like decent minutes, I don't think you want Santos, or I don't think you're going to need Santos out there for 25 minutes or something, but like decent minutes, that's probably the 8 you would be looking at, with, Jorge Diaz-Graham getting 4 minutes or less in place of Hinson, giving Hinson a rest. But they can go, if you get Nate Santos involved, and if Nate Santos can play, you can go with some really small lineups where he's like at a 4. You know what I mean? They've done things this year where they've used different styles of lineups, kind of like that. So, but I think that's your ideal. So what you're really looking for is Hughley to return to form, and you're looking for Nate Santos to step up. Nate Santos, I think, has to be better. Somebody last night said Santos is going to win them a game this year, and I was, really, man, he played 2 minutes last night. He played 2 minutes and had no recorded stats outside of those 2 minutes. But okay. I don't know. I think that's probably the guy. If you're really going to have legitimate depth, you could probably get by with going 7 deep. I just think you're going to run your guards into the ground. I really do. I know Jim Boeheim sort of famously only goes about 7 deep, and sometimes, that's probably about the extent of it. I just think you'd like another guy to step up there, and Santos would be the ideal one. If Will Jeffers was healthy, you'd say maybe he could be in the mix. Obviously, if Dior Johnson was playing, he could be in the mix to take another outside spot, another perimeter spot. But with the players they have right now, the personnel they have, I think that's the guy that you're looking for to step up, to be a contributor off the bench, and then give you the opportunity to go legitimately 8 deep. Again, with a couple minutes for Jorge, I think that could be a pretty good rotation. But you're going to need, again, Hughley to return to form, and you're going to need Santos to actually play well. Let's see here. Joe New says, Chris, what's your favorite memory of DeMar Hamlin on the field? For Pitt, probably like the body slam at Syracuse. I mean, when it comes down to it, the body slam was pretty good, I guess. I mean, he made big plays. He had some big plays against Virginia Tech in 2020. I was just looking up some of his notable plays. He had like 3 4th-down tackles against Virginia Tech in 2020. If you remember that Virginia Tech game, that was like final month of the season. Jalen Twyman opted out before the year started. Paris Ford had left the team by that point. And then they got to that Virginia Tech game, and they had like a bunch of guys out for COVID. Jordan Addison didn't play. I think like 7 or 8, maybe more guys didn't play, either due to positive tests or contact tracing or whatever it was. You remember all those buzzwords back then? And so it ended up being a big win because they crushed Virginia Tech, playing while they were missing a bunch of starters and regular contributors. And, it ended up being a pretty good win. And I think Hamlin made some big plays in that one. So, but probably the body slam at Syracuse. That was probably the one that stands out to me the most, or I remember the most of an individual play from Damar Hamlin at Pitt. Let's see. Scrolling through here, see what other people are talking about. We got about 10 minutes left here, but let's see. Ryan says, anything new on Derek Davis? He looked good in the bowl. Yeah, Derek Davis from Gateway at LSU. He's in the transfer portal. I think he rushed for a touchdown in their bowl game. This is a tough situation. I don't know what's going on with Derek Davis. I know that there's not... he was a 4-star defensive back prospect, went to LSU as a defensive back in the class of 2021, so he's a sophomore this year, second-year player. He, not sure if he redshirted or not, but it's neither here nor there. Went there as a defensive back, went there as a safety. Never really caught on playing defense. Ended up getting some snaps and a couple carries at the end of the year, end of this regular season this year at running back. And then, had some rushing attempts in the bowl game as well. Rushed for a touchdown. I don't know what his final stats were. And the thing I keep hearing is that more and more as colleges are looking at him, they're not really convinced he can play on defense. That they're more interested in him as a running back, and that seems like that's Pitt's conclusion as well. But Pitt, I don't know. I can't tell if they're really pushing for him or not. I get sort of mixed signals whenever I start sort of looking into it. And so I'm not really sure what's going on there. It's a question of, can he help your running back room is what it seems to be. That, can he help your running back room right now? And, I'm sort of the mind that they could use some help in the running back room. Assuming Sebo Flemister comes back next year, they're going to have Rodney Hammond and Sebo Flemister as two upperclassmen, and then the two incoming freshmen, Montravius Lloyd and TJ Harvison. And I like Lloyd and Harvison, but they're going to be freshmen. I think they could use another veteran guy, another older running back to come in. I don't know. I think the coaches agree with that too. I think they would like to bring in another veteran back. The question is, can they find a better back than Derek Davis, a converted safety? And maybe they can, maybe they can't. It depends on who's out there and who they think they're going to get and who they're able to get. But it's just sort of one of these things where if you can, if you really want a running back, okay, can you get a better running back than him? Or is he a good enough running back that he fills what you want out of that transfer role? If you, if you decide to go get a transfer running back. So, I don't really know. We'll see what happens. I think this weekend, actually starting today, transfers can go on visits. So we'll see if Derek Davis ends up visiting anywhere and kind of go from there. Let's see. Scrolling down. Anthony Tennyson says, Chris, I'm hearing that Big John will be back Saturday after 2.5 weeks, so training to get in shape. I think there was something, maybe he said it on his social media or something like that, that he's coming back this Saturday. So we'll see. We'll see if he plays against Clemson. We'll see if he's in uniform, what he decides to do. Well, I don't know what the situation is. Anthony Tennyson goes on and he says, people still have to understand this team is only 15 games old as far as playing with each other. They're probably going to be playing their best ball and probably the last 9 games of the year. So I think that's a really great point, Tony. I think that's an important point that, particularly when we look at the early season struggles this team had, and Nellie Cummings kind of talked about it last night, and I think Jeff Capel has talked about it. I think we've talked about it on this show, and I think a lot of Pitt fans recognize it, that it took them a while to learn how to play together. It took a little while to become a team. You have a bunch of new faces in prominent roles. Blake Hinson, Nellie Cummings, Greg Elliott, new faces. Federico in a prominent role. Early in the season, you saw more prominent roles for like Jorge Diaz-Graham and Guillermo Diaz-Graham. You have these new guys, new faces in prominent roles, and that can take a little time. I mean, that can take a little time to figure each other out and figure out how to play together. And I think some of the struggles they had early in the season probably reflect that. Now, they've figured it out a little bit. They're 15 games in. And I think you can see how they've come together. I think Nelly Cummings is a great example of it. Nelly Cummings wasn't playing all that great early in the season. Either he didn't understand how to play with his teammates, or his teammates didn't understand how to play with him, or he just wasn't comfortable yet, or his shots weren't falling, whatever it was. Now, Nelly Cummings is really good. If it wasn't for Blake Hinson and Jamarius Burton, you'd say, well, maybe Nelly Cummings is the best player on the team right now. I mean, those three have been doing so much work to carry this team, and they're not alone. Greg Elliott has made big shots. Nike Sabandi has been a revelation as the sixth man. Federico, like I talked about. But that big three of Cummings, Burton, and Hinson right now is really carrying the team. And that a lot of that reflects how Cummings has developed over the course of 15 games. And I tend to agree with you. I think they can keep getting better. I think they can keep developing and growing together over the next 15 games, 16 games, however much, I guess they have 16 ACC games left before the postseason. They can keep growing together and get better, which is pretty exciting in terms of, prospects down the road. JM Zags says, once Hughley is healthy, he needs to be inserted into the starting lineup. His ability to pass out of the post is going to be incredible to watch with the shooting around him. I think he eventually will be back in the starting lineup. I wouldn't do it immediately, but I would expect it to happen eventually. If he's playing on Saturday, I'm still starting Federico. Yeah, I mean, if you play like Federico did down the stretch in last night's win against Virginia, you start again. You know what I mean? John Hughley or not, you start again. And Hughley has to recognize that Federico was really good in those final 16 minutes. He played really well, and 8 points and 5 rebounds, and a steal, and drew a foul or two. Or maybe he didn't draw a foul, but he played really well, and he should start again. But if Hughley's ready, he should play 5-6 minutes each half, whatever he's capable of. You know what I mean? You're going to need to ease him back in. You're going to need to get him comfortable on the court again, figure out how to play in the context of what everyone else is doing, and play as a team with these guys. But yeah, I think for me, I would start off with Federico as a starter, and then play it by ear from there. William Schroeder says, Chris, I was recently diagnosed with kidney failure, and your podcast has been a good distraction while doing dialysis. Keep up the great work. William, I appreciate you. I appreciate you listening to the podcast. You when you say something like that, you make me want to do like 3 hours a day or something. If this is helping you get through it, that means a lot, and all the best to you. And let me say, you will. I think you'll like the Morning Pit on Thursday. I think you'll enjoy that. That'll be a good one to listen to. It's a little bit longer too, so hopefully it can take up some more time of you. Let's see. Matt P says, don't know if you just saw, but Miami just got boat raced by Georgia Tech, and Duke is getting crushed by NC State. Pitt Clemson is for sole possession of first place in the ACC and the last undefeated team. It's wild stuff, man. Still early in the season, but wild stuff. Scrolling down here as we're almost running out of time. Let's see. Panther Room says John is probably the 7th best player on the team right now. I mean, he's not playing at all, so I don't know if he's. I don't know how I would rank him. I do know that when Hughley was out there, he wasn't playing very well. You know what I mean? He wasn't having a good season. Certainly not up to his expectations, the expectations anyone had for him. And some of that comes from being hurt and taking a while to get back from it. And I don't know what this absence was about. Maybe it was just, you know what, just take some time. Stop trying to force it. Stop trying to rush it back onto the court. Just take some time, get healthy, and come out and help us win in these final 15 games, 16 games. Maybe that's it. I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever get a definitive answer on it or not. We'll keep asking. I don't know if we'll ever get a definitive answer or not. But either way, Hughley or no Hughley, Saturday is going to be interesting. Clemson, another one of the teams that's sort of right there around the top of the ACC, and it's only 4 games into a 20-game schedule, so you're not seeing a ton of separation yet. You're not going to see a ton of separation for another couple weeks, I think. But this is going to be one of those games where Pitt's got a real chance to make a statement. Maybe not about who they are or where they belong nationally, but certainly about who they are and where they belong in the ACC. If they can win this game on Saturday, it'll be their first 5-0 start since joining the ACC. First 5-0 start to conference play since joining the ACC. And I think they've only beat Clemson maybe once as a conference opponent in basketball. They got more wins in football. Two conference wins over Clemson in football, only one in basketball. But look, if they keep winning, there's going to be something on the line in every game. And that's fun. That's a good thing. That's something to enjoy and look forward to. It's nice to have basketball games with stakes again. But we're also only on January 4th. It's a long way to go. And then there's 16 games of conference play. Whatever happens over the course of those 16 games, we'll be talking about it right here on the Panther-Lair Show every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. And of course, the Morning Pit, Monday through Friday, every day right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks everybody who tuned in tonight. It's been a lot of fun, as it always is. This hour flies by. Appreciate all the super chatters and everybody who joined the conversation and posted comments and questions in the live stream. That always makes it fun. I enjoy the back and forth, and I appreciate you guys doing it. While you're here, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You don't want to miss anything we put out there. Lots of exclusive Pitt video content, and just another element to our coverage. So I hope you enjoy it right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So thanks again for tuning in tonight or watching the podcast or video later in the week whenever you check it out. We appreciate that. I hope you've had a great week so far. Just got a couple more days before this week is over, and then it'll be Pitt Clemson at the Peterson Event Center on Saturday. So thanks again. Make sure you stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com for all the latest Pitt sports news. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll talk to you live next Wednesday night for the Panther-Lair Show. But before that, we'll be here with the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.